The evening sky was fading into a deep shade of blue as traffic moved slowly along the edge of the city. Red and blue lights flashed ahead like a warning to everyone on the road. A police checkpoint had been set up after a reported traffic violation in the area. Drivers waited impatiently while officers inspected each vehicle. Among them stood Officer Riker. He was known across the department for his rough style and his belief that fear kept people under control. He enjoyed raising his voice. He enjoyed showing authority. And he enjoyed watching people shrink under pressure. That night he felt even more powerful as the line of cars grew longer. He hit the flashlight against his palm and looked for someone to target, someone he could intimidate with ease. That was when a black SUV rolled slowly toward his checkpoint. The vehicle looked ordinary. No special plates. No official markings. Nothing that suggested importance. Riker smirked. He found his next target. The SUV stopped. The door opened. A tall, calm man stepped out. Steven Seagal. But to Riker he was nobody. Just another civilian passing through the checkpoint. Steven carried himself with quiet confidence. His steps were steady. His breathing unshaken. There was no sign of fear or frustration. He simply looked like a man heading home after a long day. Riker disliked calm people. He believed calmness was a sign of disrespect toward his authority. So he immediately barked at Steven to move faster. Steven simply nodded and stepped forward. His voice remained steady. He explained that he was on his way to a briefing and needed to cross the checkpoint quickly. But Riker did not care. He assumed Steven was lying. In his mind, anyone who stayed calm was hiding something. Anyone who stayed quiet was challenging him. Riker stepped closer until he was inches away from Steven. He searched his eyes as if trying to break his calm exterior. Steven stood firm. He did not raise his hands. He did not argue. He did not fear the officer. His silence only made Riker more aggressive. The tension rose. Drivers inside their cars watched closely. A few whispered. Others held their phones up ready to record. The air felt heavy as if something explosive was about to happen. Riker demanded identification. Steven reached into his jacket to pull out his wallet. He moved slowly because he knew sudden movements around police officers could trigger danger. But as soon as his hand reached inside his jacket, Riker snapped. He stepped forward, grabbed Steven by the arm and yelled that he was resisting. Steven tried to speak. He tried to explain that he was simply following the order. But Riker refused to listen. In one sudden burst of arrogance and anger, Riker punched Steven across the face. The crowd gasped. A few people screamed. Even the officers nearby froze for a moment. The sound of the punch echoed across the checkpoint like a gunshot. It was a moment that shifted everything. Steven did not react. His body hardly moved. His expression did not change. It was as if he had expected the officer to behave this way. He slowly lifted his head and looked directly at Riker. At that moment the world seemed to stop. Riker thought he had humiliated a regular man. A random traveler. Someone who would fear him and walk away without a fight. But he had no idea who he had just struck. He had punched a man who held federal authority. A man trained at the highest level. A man who had walked into dangerous missions the officer could never imagine. He had punched an undercover FBI agent. And everything that happened next would shake the entire police station to its core. It was late evening on a quiet highway where the sky had turned a deep shade of violet and the wind pushed softly across the open road. The city lights were far behind and only the soft glow of street lamps guided travelers forward. Cars moved at a slow, steady pace through a checkpoint set up by local police after reports of suspicious activity in the area. Most drivers waited with patience. Some sighed in frustration. Yet none of them felt more tense than the officers working the night shift. Among them stood Officer Riker, a man whose reputation had traveled farther than the highway itself. Riker was known for his harsh temper and reckless attitude. Many officers avoided working with him because they never knew when he would snap. They said he did not enforce the law. He enforced his ego. He shouted at people for the smallest mistakes and believed fear was the fastest way to control a situation. Authority in his mind meant raising his voice, pushing his weight around and making sure everyone felt smaller than him. He wore his badge like a weapon rather than a responsibility. As the evening grew darker, Riker's mood grew sharper. He paced between the cars at the checkpoint, slamming the butt of his flashlight into his palm. He inspected vehicles with impatience and glared at every driver as if expecting trouble from each one. Other officers gave him space. They had learned to keep their distance whenever he looked for someone to target. Riker needed little reason to start a confrontation. A slow movement, a polite question, or even a calm expression was enough to provoke him. It was during this tense atmosphere that a black SUV approached the line. The vehicle slowed as it neared the checkpoint. It had no government plates, no agency stickers, and no visible identifiers. To an untrained eye it looked like any other SUV crossing the highway. But to Riker it triggered a spark of suspicion. He narrowed his eyes and stepped closer as the car rolled to a gentle stop. The door opened and a calm man stepped out. He moved with confidence but without arrogance. He did not look afraid, nor did he look eager to cause trouble. His expression remained steady and unreadable. It was Steven Seagal, though in that moment he looked like an ordinary traveler dressed in plain clothes. He wore a simple jacket, dark jeans, and boots fit for long hours of movement. No badge was visible on him. No weapon holster. No sign of protection. He looked like a lone man traveling by night with a purpose he did not need to announce. Riker did not see the calmness. He saw disrespect. In his mind, anyone who did not panic at his presence was already challenging his authority. He took a step forward and barked at Steven for moving too slowly. His voice cut through the air like a blade. Some drivers in line flinched at the sound. Steven, however, did not react. He simply nodded and continued approaching the checkpoint with steady steps. Steven spoke in a polite, even tone. He explained that he was on his way to a federal briefing and needed to cross the checkpoint quickly. His voice was calm and controlled, as if he was used to stressful situations. He did not raise his hands. He did not raise his voice. He simply stated the truth. But Riker did not accept calmness. He interpreted every word as a lie. In his mind, no ordinary man should speak so confidently at a police checkpoint. Riker smirked with a look of superiority. He believed he had caught someone pretending to be important. Someone trying to slip past him with a made-up story. He stepped slightly closer, invading Steven's personal space as a show of dominance. Other officers watched the exchange from the side. Some recognized Steven's posture and silent strength, yet remained unsure. Others whispered to themselves, wondering why Riker looked so eager for a fight. Drivers inside their cars leaned forward in their seats. The tension was growing, like a storm cloud forming overhead. Steven maintained his polite manner. He remained still and patient. Yet Riker's suspicion only intensified. He believed Steven's controlled behavior was a sign of guilt. He assumed Steven was hiding something. He assumed Steven was lying about the federal briefing. He assumed he had finally found someone he could push around and humiliate. The quiet highway grew even quieter as the scene unfolded. The breeze slowed. The officers stepped back. The moon cast a faint glow across the checkpoint. Steven stood as a pillar of calm. Riker stood like a fuse ready to ignite. Every second stretched longer than the previous one. Riker prepared to escalate the situation solely because Steven would not tremble under his authority. He believed this calm traveler was a threat to his pride. He believed shouting would break his composure. He believed he had complete control of the moment. He had no idea that he was standing inches away from a man trained to survive missions far beyond his understanding. A man who held federal authority higher than anything Riker could imagine. A man who could end his career with a single sentence. But Riker did not know. And because he did not know, he stepped into the biggest mistake of his life. Officer Riker stepped closer, with heavy boots striking the pavement in a sharp rhythm. His eyes narrowed as if he were inspecting a criminal rather than an ordinary traveler. The tension around the checkpoint thickened like fog rolling in from the mountains. Drivers leaned forward. Officers exchanged uneasy glances. Even the air felt still, as if waiting for something to snap. Riker demanded identification in a harsh voice that echoed across the highway. He pointed his flashlight directly at Steven's chest with a level of aggression that was not necessary. Steven, however, remained calm. His breathing steady. His expression unchanged. Without hesitation, he reached slowly into his jacket to take out his wallet. The movement was smooth and controlled. Anyone with experience could see he was simply following orders. But Riker was not looking for obedience. He was looking for a reason to explode. Before Steven could speak or even pull out his ID, Riker grabbed him by the arm with sudden force. The grip was unnecessary and reckless. Riker shouted that Steven was wasting police time. His voice carried across the checkpoint like a blast of anger. Several officers stiffened. A few drivers gasped. The tension rose with every second. Steven tried to explain. His tone remained steady. His words were clear. He tried to say that he was reaching for his ID just as the officer requested. But Riker never cared for explanations. He believed explanations were excuses. He believed calmness was defiance. So he cut Steven off before he could finish a single sentence. Riker raised his voice even louder and accused Steven of resisting. The accusation was not true, yet Riker delivered it with absolute confidence. To him, authority was not about truth. It was about dominance. He wanted Steven to panic. He wanted him to react. He wanted something that would justify the aggression he was already preparing to unleash. Steven did not react. He simply stood still with a steady look in his eyes. That look irritated Riker more than anything else. It was a look of quiet strength. A look that did not break. A look that told the officer he could not intimidate this man no matter how loud he shouted. And that made Riker furious. Without warning, without hesitation, and without reason, Riker suddenly punched Steven across the face. The impact echoed through the checkpoint. The sound of the strike was sharp and violent, like a crack splitting through the night. The force pushed Steven's head to the side, but his body did not move. He did not fall. He did not stumble. He did not even blink. He simply turned his head back slowly and looked at the officer with the same steady expression as before. The crowd watching gasped in shock. A few people shouted. Some screamed. Others pulled out their phones and began recording. Even the officers who had worked with Riker for years stepped back in disbelief. They had seen him yell. They had seen him threaten. But punching a civilian with no provocation was a line they never expected him to cross. The entire highway seemed to hold its breath. Steven remained completely still. His calm presence in the middle of chaos felt unreal. It was as if he had trained for situations far more dangerous than this. His face showed no fear, no anger, no confusion. Just a strong and focused stare that cut through the loud beating of hearts around them. Riker waited for a reaction. He waited for Steven to fight back. He wanted an excuse to escalate the situation further. Yet nothing came. Steven kept standing with perfect control. His silence was stronger than Riker's fury. His lack of reaction felt heavier than a punch. Riker grew even angrier. He felt challenged. He felt belittled. He felt out of control. He stepped closer again, shouting that Steven was resisting arrest. His voice trembled with rage as he pushed his authority to its breaking point. But the truth was clear to everyone watching. It was Riker who had lost control. It was Riker who was abusing his position. It was Riker who was crossing a line that could cost him everything. Steven kept staring at him with calm, unwavering eyes. It was the kind of stare that came from a man who had seen danger far greater than an angry officer. A stare that carried discipline, training, experience, and power that needed no display. The crowd fell silent. Even the highway seemed to stop moving. All eyes were on Steven. All fear was pointed at Riker. And for the first time that night, Riker felt the weight of a mistake he did not yet understand. Because the man he had just punched was no ordinary traveler, that he was a federal agent on an undercover assignment. A man whose authority towered far above Riker's badge. A man who would soon change the entire direction of that night. And Riker had just triggered the storm that was about to fall on him. For a long silent moment the checkpoint stood frozen. The punch had landed, yet the man who received it barely moved. Steven Seagal remained steady as a mountain. That single moment shook every person standing nearby. No one expected a calm traveler to withstand a hit from an angry officer without flinching. The scene felt unreal, and the reactions began spilling through the crowd one by one. Other officers whispered among themselves with uneasy tones. They leaned closer to one another as if afraid their voices would carry too far. Some whispered that Riker had gone too far. Others whispered that the man looked familiar. A few whispered that the situation was about to spiral out of control. Their voices drifted through the air like scattered dust, unsure where to settle. Some officers at the back laughed nervously. They did not laugh because the situation was funny. They laughed because they were terrified. Laughter was the only way they knew how to hide the fear crawling across their skin. They laughed while their eyes darted from Steven to Riker, wondering what would come next. They laughed without joy, without confidence, and without the sense of safety they once felt while standing behind their uniforms. Several drivers inside their cars raised their phones and recorded the moment. Their hands shook slightly as they zoomed in. They knew something serious was unfolding. They knew this was not an ordinary argument between a police officer and a driver. They knew the punch would spark a chain of events far bigger than a checkpoint dispute. Some whispered to each other inside their cars. Others remained silent and focused on capturing every detail. Near the edge of the checkpoint stood a young rookie officer, barely 6 months into the job. He had been observing the entire scene with wide eyes. When Riker punched Steven, the rookie stepped back in fear and recognition. He had seen Steven Seagal before. Not in person, but in federal training videos used to teach officers how to handle high-level threats. Steven was a name whispered in briefing rooms. An operative known for tactical mastery and exceptional discipline. The rookie recognized him instantly and the realization shook him from head to toe. The rookie's breath grew heavier. He knew Riker had crossed a dangerous line. He knew this was no ordinary civilian. He knew Riker had just assaulted a federal asset. Yet he stayed silent because he feared Riker more than the truth. Riker's temper was legendary. His anger unpredictable. The rookie prayed silently for the situation to calm down. But deep down he knew it would not. Steven stood calmly. His expression unwavering. His breathing controlled. Then he spoke in a low, clear tone that carried across the entire checkpoint. "Officer, you have made a serious mistake." The words dropped like thunder. They were not loud, yet they carried a weight that silenced every whisper around them. The rookie swallowed hard. Several officers shifted uneasily. Even the drivers recording felt their hands grow still. The calmness in Steven's voice was more powerful than any yell Riker had thrown that night. But Riker did not feel the weight of the warning. He felt only pride in the punch he had delivered. His ego swelled. He believed he had dominated the situation. He believed he had put Steven in his place. He believed the stare he received was a sign of fear instead of control. Blinded by arrogance, he shouted for backup, thinking he needed more officers to maintain control. He yelled with confidence as if nothing dangerous had happened. "Back up to checkpoint now." His voice boomed through the radios. He thought reinforcements would give him greater power. He thought more officers would reinforce his authority. He thought he had proven himself as the strongest man on the scene. He was wrong. Completely wrong. The highway remained quiet for a few seconds. A heavy silence formed like a storm cloud preparing to break. Then something unusual happened. The silence was interrupted by the low, steady rumble of engines approaching fast from the distance. Heads turned toward the sound. Officers straightened. Drivers inside their cars stopped recording and stared. Even Riker paused for a brief moment. Out of the darkness, 3 black SUVs rolled toward the checkpoint. They moved with purpose. Smooth. Silent. Coordinated. Too coordinated for ordinary patrol units. Their arrival changed the entire atmosphere instantly. The air thickened. The tension intensified. Every officer felt their heartbeat rise. The rookie's eyes widened even more. He recognized those vehicles. They belonged to federal agencies. He knew immediately that the situation had escalated beyond local control. He stepped back another few inches as fear traveled down his spine. The SUV stopped in perfect alignment. Doors swung open. Federal agents stepped out wearing tactical suits. Their faces were stern. Their movements swift. They did not look around for danger. They looked straight at Steven with respect and urgency. The entire checkpoint went silent. Officers stared in shock. Drivers froze in disbelief. And for the first time that night, Riker felt the tension shift away from Steven and toward himself. The moment those SUVs stopped, the truth became undeniable. This was not a simple checkpoint incident. This was the beginning of a reckoning. The black SUVs stood still with their engines rumbling softly like distant thunder. Their arrival alone shifted the entire atmosphere of the checkpoint. A moment earlier, Riker believed he controlled everything. He believed he had full authority over the calm man he had just punched. But the sight of those vehicles shattered that illusion faster than he could blink. The doors of the SUVs opened in one synchronized motion. Federal agents stepped out wearing tactical uniforms that carried an unmistakable presence. Their posture was sharp. Their movements disciplined. Every step they took was controlled with purpose and precision. They were not here for a routine visit. They were here with urgency. The agents rushed toward Steven in a straight, determined formation. They did not glance at the other officers. They did not acknowledge the crowd. Their focus was locked entirely on the man standing in the center of the checkpoint. The same man who had taken a punch without flinching. The same man who had warned Riker with calm authority. As they approached, the agents spoke in firm, respectful tones. "Yes, sir, we are here." That single sentence crashed through the checkpoint like a shockwave. Officers who had been whispering fell silent. Drivers who were recording lowered their phones in disbelief. Even the rookie who recognized Steven earlier felt his knees weaken. They all knew what "sir" meant in a federal context. It meant rank, power, leadership. Not fear-based leadership like Riker's. True leadership earned through experience and skill. Riker froze. His mind went blank as if someone had pulled the ground from beneath him. For the first time that night, a flicker of fear broke through his arrogance. He watched the agents gather around Steven with absolute respect. Not fear. Not hesitation. Respect. The kind given only to someone who held a position far above them. One of the agents stepped forward. His voice carried across the checkpoint with a tone that silenced even the wind. This man is Special Agent Steven Seagal from the FBI Tactical Division. The words dropped with the weight of a hammer. Silence followed immediately. A deep, heavy silence that wrapped around the entire checkpoint. It was the kind of silence that comes when people realize they have witnessed something far more serious than they first imagined. Every officer stiffened. Their eyes widened. Their mouths parted slightly as they struggled to absorb the truth. Riker stepped back instinctively. His legs trembled. His throat tightened. All the confidence he carried earlier vanished in an instant. His entire world collapsed the moment he understood what he had done. He had not shoved a civilian. He had not argued with a troubled driver. He had assaulted a federal officer. And not just any officer. A special agent from one of the highest tactical divisions in the country. His hand slowly lowered to his side as if letting go of invisible authority. His breathing became shallow. He tried to speak but no words came out. His voice failed him. His courage failed him. Every mistake from the last few minutes replayed in his mind like a nightmare. The shouting. The accusations. The aggression. The punch. The single moment that sealed his fate. Other officers stared at Riker with a mixture of shock and disbelief. Some were afraid to move. Others were afraid to breathe. Even those who had laughed earlier now stood like statues. They did not step forward to defend Riker. They did not offer excuses. They understood the gravity of the situation. They understood the consequences. They understood that attacking a federal agent was not a mistake that could be erased with an apology. Drivers inside their cars whispered nervously. A few covered their mouths. Others watched with wide eyes as the scene unfolded like a movie none of them wanted to be part of. The rookie officer stepped back until his shoulders touched the hood of a patrol car. He had known the truth earlier. But hearing it announced aloud made the reality hit him even harder. Steven remained calm while the agents formed a protective circle around him. He did not raise his voice. He did not smirk. He did not gloat. His silence spoke louder than any reaction. It showed control. It showed discipline. It showed the difference between power held with ego and power held with purpose. Riker finally found the strength to whisper one broken sentence. I did not know. The lead agent turned his head with a stern look. That is exactly the problem. Riker felt the word strike harder than any punch he had ever thrown. He knew he was finished. He knew everything he had built with force and intimidation had crumbled in front of officers, drivers, and federal agents. His badge, which he once treated like a weapon, now felt heavier than a chain around his neck. The silence deepened. No one moved. No one spoke. The entire checkpoint had become a courtroom with the truth standing in the center. Officer Riker had assaulted a federal agent. And the consequences were about to fall on him with full force. Steven looked directly at Riker with a calm, steady expression that made the entire checkpoint fall silent. His voice carried no anger and no fear. It carried only truth. He said, "Your uniform does not give you power. Your behavior does." The words hit harder than any punch Riker had thrown. Every officer standing nearby felt the weight of that message. The rookie who had recognized Steven lowered his eyes because he knew the moment was bigger than anything he had seen in the academy. Riker, on the other hand, stood frozen. His hands shook. His face went pale as he realized he had crossed a line that never should be crossed. The FBI director stepped forward. His presence alone changed the air around him. He examined the scene with sharp eyes. He saw Riker. He saw the bruise forming on Steven's face. He saw the fear spreading through the ranks of officers who had laughed and recorded the incident only minutes earlier. Then he spoke with a firm voice that needed no force to be respected. "Officer Riker, you are suspended effective immediately." There was no debate. No argument. No further explanation. The director did not repeat himself because everyone present knew the decision was the only reasonable one. Riker opened his mouth as if to defend himself. But no words came out. His excuses died in his throat. He knew the truth. He had not acted out of duty. He had acted out of ego. He had not tried to uphold the law. He had tried to assert dominance. Now that arrogance had destroyed everything he thought made him powerful. Steven turned slightly and noticed the young rookie standing at the far edge of the checkpoint. The rookie had been the only one who did not join the mocking voices. The only one who did not rush to record the chaos. He had stepped back because he had recognized Steven. But more importantly, he had stepped back because he knew something was wrong. Steven respected that instinct. He walked toward him slowly. The rookie stiffened. He expected criticism. Instead, Steven placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You did the right thing today." The rookie swallowed hard. His eyes shone with a mixture of relief and pride. The FBI director glanced at Steven, who gave a simple nod. The director then addressed the rookie. Agent Seagal recommends you for the Federal Discipline Training Program. The rookie blinked in disbelief. He had dreamed of such an opportunity but never imagined it would come in a moment like this. Steven added, "We need officers who stay calm in the middle of noise. You have that quality. Do not lose it." The rookie nodded with absolute sincerity. For the first time that night he felt the honor of his oath instead of the pressure of his badge. While the other officers stood silent, Steven began to walk away from the checkpoint. His steps were slow and steady. He did not look back. He did not demand respect. He did not raise his voice. He did not show anger. He believed that justice was not something you shouted. Justice was something you lived. And he had lived it clearly today. The black SUVs formed a protective formation around him. The federal agents opened the door for him. Steven paused for one brief moment and looked at the entire group of officers. Power is not in your uniform. Power is in your discipline. Those were his final words before he stepped inside the SUV. The doors closed gently and the vehicles rolled away into the dark highway. As the convoy disappeared, the officers at the checkpoint slowly returned to reality. Riker remained seated on the ground with his head in his hands. His career, his reputation, and his authority had all collapsed in a single moment. Nothing he said could fix it. Nothing he did could erase it. He had struck a federal agent. But more than that, he had struck a man who had shown him more dignity than he deserved. The rookie approached the director after Steven left. The director placed a hand on his shoulder. "Remember this night," he said. "Many officers wear the badge. Few understand the duty that comes with it." The rookie nodded again. He knew he had witnessed something rare. A lesson that would shape the rest of his career. Hours later, after reports were filed and the checkpoint resumed its routine work, the story began spreading through the police station. Some officers shook their heads in disbelief. Others felt embarrassed. Some were terrified by the consequences they might face for laughing and recording. But one thing was clear. No one would forget the moment Steven Seagal stood calm after being punched. No one would forget the arrival of the federal SUVs. And no one would forget the line that echoed long after he left. "Your behavior is your real power." Steven believed justice speaks louder than ego. And that night justice had spoken clearly. "You said, respect is meant for every human. It is not a reward. It is not a privilege. It is the starting point of every interaction. When respect is present, even the most difficult moments can be handled with clarity and dignity. When respect is missing, even the smallest situation can turn into chaos." That truth became clear on the highway that night. One officer allowed his ego to lead him. He believed authority meant barking orders and throwing punches. He believed fear was the fastest way to earn compliance. But fear never creates true leadership. Fear only hides weakness. Respect is what reveals real strength. Never judge people based on assumptions. The surface never tells the full story. Steven stepped out of his SUV looking like an ordinary civilian. No badge. No escort. No sign of status or rank. Officer Riker assumed this made him an easy target. He assumed Steven had no power. He assumed he could insult him and hit him without consequence. Those assumptions destroyed his entire career in one night. This is the danger of judging others too quickly. You never know who they are. You never know what role they play. You never know what battles they have fought or what responsibilities they carry. The person you mistreat today might be the person who holds your future tomorrow. Riker saw Steven as someone beneath him. He saw him as someone he could control. But Steven was an FBI agent with authority far beyond Riker's imagination. One moment Riker felt proud of his aggression. The next moment he stood frozen as federal SUVs arrived and his world collapsed. This is the unpredictable nature of life. The person you disrespect might become your supervisor. The person you mock might become your mentor. The person you hurt might become the one who determines your fate. Life has a way of turning things around when you least expect it. Respect is not about titles. Respect is not about rank. Respect is not about how you dress or how you look. It is about recognizing humanity in others. Steven showed respect even after being punched. He did not shout. He did not retaliate. He did not lose control. That calm response became the loudest lesson of the entire night. Real strength is not in aggression. Real strength is in restraint. Real strength is calm and controlled. Think about that for a moment. Anyone can get angry. Anyone can shout. Anyone can strike back. But only the disciplined can stay composed. Only the wise can choose patience. Only the strong can walk away without letting ego take over. Steven's behavior reminded every officer present that power is not earned through force. Power is earned through self-control, through discipline, through a steady mind. This story is not just about police officers or federal agents. It is a message for everyone. In family, in work, in friendships, in public. Treat people with respect. You never know what they are carrying. You never know what they are going through. You never know what position they hold or what role they will play in your life tomorrow. A single moment of arrogance can destroy years of effort. A single act of humility can open doors you never imagined. Think about the rookie who stayed calm that night. He watched the situation unfold and made a simple choice. He chose respect. That choice earned him praise from Steven and an invitation to train with federal officers. One moment of maturity changed his entire future. Respect can lift a person higher than rank ever will. Respect can turn a simple day into a turning point. Respect can protect a career that ego would easily destroy. So as you reflect on this story, ask yourself what kind of strength you value. Do you value loudness or discipline? Do you value ego or wisdom? Do you value fear or respect? The answer defines the kind of person you become. Steven proved that calm is not weakness. Calm is mastery. Calm is the highest form of strength. If you believe that real strength is calm and controlled, type respect in the comments. Let your voice stand for discipline and dignity. And before you go, tell me where you are watching from so I can thank you personally. Your support matters more than you know. Your presence in this community keeps these stories alive. Your respect keeps the message strong.